Welcome to the Motivitystate Podcast, the space where we dive into mobility, movement, biomechanics, neurology, and much, much more. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Motivitystate Podcast. My name is Rado, your host as usual. Today's guest is a true practitioner of movement. His name is Yuri Marmerstein. As usual, I'm going to say a couple of words of how we met and how I know him, and then I'll let him introduce himself into more detail. Yuri has been one of the guys that I've been following for a couple of years over Instagram and other social media because he always had and still has those small subtle details about improving your skill set or just like mobility wise and different things and like golden nuggets. So once I decided to start inviting interesting guests, teachers into my studio. He was the first one I actually reached out to, and he was super responsive. And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that's when he came to the studio. We had a great workshop back in 2019 before the pandemic, and yeah, Yuri, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming along
Yeah,
and.
no
Uh,
worries.
and yeah, tell us a couple of words about yourself for those of you who don't know you or who want to know a little more than what you already show on social media.
Yeah, I'm still learning about myself, and what I show on social media is I don't know. It's just it's a game. I'm treating it as a game now more than anything. Um, I don't know. I've done a lot of different things. I'm more known for teaching kind of handstands, acrobatics, whatever, body weight strength, body control, that kind of thing. I was not a gymnast growing up, so I just kind of taught myself by throwing myself around for many years and making a lot of mistakes. And then I did a lot of different athletic disciplines. I was a college athlete. I did a lot of just different stuff, and I'm still doing a lot of different stuff because to me, it's just about doing different stuff so that when you get old, you don't feel old,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was teaching workshops. I was traveling and teaching workshops for like 7 or 8 years around the world. Then the world got shut down, so now I'm still kind of picking myself up and figuring out what the next plan is or what the next series of plans are.
Yeah, that's I guess what we're all up to nowadays. Um, I want to start with what you said about doing different things, because you're pretty strong at different skills, and you have like very wide skill set. Apart from acrobatics and handstands, you can do all the like the gymnastic skills like planches, front levers, and stuff like that. So tell us more about how your journey started and how did you learn all those skills, because I think oftentimes when I have clients who are beginners or even intermediate, when they come and they've been training for a while and have some decent basic strengths, and then they come up and say, I want to learn this and this and this and this skill, and I'm like, oh, all right, hold on a little bit, because I mean those are hard skills. I mean they're level A in terms of gymnastics, but for the regular individual there who hasn't been a gymnast, those are hard skills, so it takes time. So how did you learn the skills, and how would you normally prioritize your training, depending on those goals, if you want to learn more than one thing?
The way I started was basically just had no clue what I was doing, just trying stuff and throwing myself around. So it was learning by doing it. And then if it didn't, I didn't really have a reference for what it was other than, maybe some like grainy videos or photos or 100-year-old books. So the way I learned, it's not necessarily the way that I would recommend everybody learn, but I think everybody should dip into that style of learning at least some of the time. Is you learn by doing it. You just try the thing, and then hopefully you have enough control and awareness about the thing to know if you should change something or not. And then that's kind of what I did for years, is just Again, it's not the best way to learn it, but for example, planche, I saw a video of B-Boy Jr. doing the planche, and he's an absolute beast. He also has atrophied legs, but he just does planche push-ups looking like regular push-ups. And around 2002, there was this video of him coming out, and I saw him doing that, and I thought, well, it looks hard, but I don't know. I guess I'll try it. And then I just tried it. And for like, I honestly learned the planche just by trying it for years. And then I figured out, okay, there's some regressions that you could do to build the strength. But I think it's good, even as an adult, to not discount this idea of whatever you're trying to do. Make sure you obviously be safe about it, but make sure you just try it and see what happens. So that's number one. Number two is that you're probably not going to learn most things that way. You might. A kid is more likely to learn things faster that way because they have more time, and they're less resistant with their learning process because they're always, even if they don't know it, they are always adapting. So then you have to know the constituent parts, what goes into it, what are the strength requirements, what are the psychological requirements, what are the flexibility requirements, and then you work on those separately because that's like you're getting the tool sharp enough to be able to do what you need it to do. As far as prioritizing, I'm not a good person to ask for that because I'm a little bit like I have 80 tabs on my browser open right now, and they're all important, and I'm going to get to all of them. And I'm probably going to open more tabs before the day is done. So I'm not a good person to ask about that because I'm usually kind of everywhere at once. But the analogy that I use is imagine you have a stove. It's got a couple burners, right? So it's got your main favorite burner. That's the onions. That's the stuff that you have to pay a lot of attention to or else they're going to burn. And then you got maybe a pot of water simmering for pasta or stuff like that. So in terms of goals, you can change that around, but imagine you have one main burner and then two side burners. So figure out what you want to do the most, how much time that's going to take you, and then schedule more of your training around that. And then have a couple other kind of extra things that you don't have to do as much, but you still have to do semi regularly. And then you can rotate those. And that way it's not crazy with, I want to learn this, and this, and this. It's more like, okay, let's say I'm going to spend the next 2 months prioritizing this and then working on these two other things. And once that's done, then I'm going to change that priority. And I think that's overall just kind of a smarter way to look at things because I guess this is what I recommend for other people. And it's not what I do because I'm still learning how to do things. But if you do only one thing, it's limiting. Sometimes it's good to do that as well. It's good to have that focus. If you try to do too many things, you're not really going to be able to do any of them to the level that you want. So it's just kind of finding the balance between those two and obviously working it in with your life. And then yeah, that understanding of the long term. So I get that question a lot. It's probably one of my most common questions that I get is how long is this going to take me? And the best answer I can give that's universal is longer than you think. Whatever you think, like, okay, so planche is a good example in my practice. So I saw B-Boy Jr. doing these planche push-ups with legs together. And my estimation was, okay, that looks hard. I can learn it in a year. So maybe 6 years later, I had a solid planche. Maybe it took 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Again, maybe it could have been achieved in 2 to 3 years if I had a better process and understanding of that process. But still, like, doing that, going from nothing to that skill in less than 2 years, probably is going to risk injury for most people because some skills, the skill development takes time, and some skills, the strength development takes time. And if you try to rush it, you're probably not only going to not learn the skill as well as you think, but you could also be setting yourself up for either failure or injury.
Yeah, I think what you said about just doing the things, it's like the street fitness kind of like calisthenics movement is getting really strong over here in the country, and because they built a lot of like calisthenics parks outside around the city, and there's a lot of teenagers, which is great, going out and training and trying out stuff. But I think there are two types of it can go two ways. One is Simply you're gonna try it, you're gonna go hard for it, and since you're not conditioned or your body type or whatever, you're more prone to injuries and stuff. You'll get injured and you will give up, or your body's just gonna adapt and you're gonna become like really strong, which is the smallest percentage of people anyways. And I think it applies for adults. But with adults, I think what they miss is because teenagers already have like a decent, not all of them nowadays, I mean looking at them, but let's say they're more flexible, they haven't lost all of that ability to move more naturally, whereas adults, they lack the flexibility and the mobility component, and they only work on the strength, and they sometimes wonder why they're not progressing, especially with handstands. I can see that a lot because people come to classes and then we do some stuff for the mobility in the classes, but with mostly like the skill work. And I always advise them to do stuff on their own at home because that also takes time, and we cannot do everything within that 1 hour. But people disregard that, and then they're not progressing. So I think it's like quite intuitive, but to find out the balance between dipping into, as you said, into the things yourself and trying things out, and then finding a mentor. Because I'm guessing when you started back like 15 years ago or more, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no Instagram, no YouTube videos, no tutorials, no stuff like that, no books. So if you weren't around gymnasts or somebody who's already learned the skill, which is rare, I mean, you wouldn't be able to learn. So you have pretty much less choices, and you had to learn on your own. So I always advise, and I do it myself, just like whenever you have a chance, go to seminars. I mean, pay for online coaching nowadays and stuff like that to 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 learn faster a little bit. I mean, it's still going to take the time for you to do the work, but at least you can get some guidance and get away with some injuries that otherwise might even hinder your process.
Yeah, or just to have somebody else's perspective. I think for me, it's all about a balance. I like learning on my own, and I like this idea. Again, everyone's different. Some people need more guidance, some people need less. At some point, you can only coach yourself with limitations because the way that you see yourself is always skewed. It's not the reality. So that's my general recommendation is, again, just a balance. Try things on your own because you're learning your own learning process, but get guidance as well. Get another eye to look at things because it's going to take you in the right direction and you're going to learn something that you didn't know or that you wouldn't have discovered yourself. And it's always valuable to have a separate eye because there's just certain things that you can't see about yourself. And I was talking to Kid about I send out my emails, and usually when I do an email, I write it and then I do it maybe two or three edits. And there's always going to be some kind of typo. I always miss something. And I was talking to
Hmm.
Kid about that, and he said it's really interesting that kind of sometimes it's a factor of intelligence. It's that you can't edit your own work because you correct it as you go and you correct it in your head without actually correcting it on there. And it skews your perception of what you're doing. So it's always valuable. Again, that depends on the person. For me, I like to have a concept. I develop that concept on my own. I go back and then I get the eye to look at it again. So some people need more consistent guidance, but having that eye, having that somebody else who's been through the process who can see something that you don't from an angle that you can't look at. Yeah, very valuable. And
Yeah,
this idea of going
yeah, it
back as
is.
well, so it's kind of the same with the prerequisites. I always tell people not to be so concerned with the prerequisites, but to have concerns. So kind of same idea with the skill. I think this is my preference now as a learning process is you try the thing safely, you figure out, so you go forward and backwards. It's a back and forth. You try the thing that you're doing, you figure out what went wrong, and then you go back and you fix those things in isolation. Like you try the handstand, say, okay, my shoulder, I need more shoulder mobility. So then you go back and you work on that, and then you try the thing again, and then you figure out a new mistake. It's like, okay, now my shoulders are better, but now I'm not able to coordinate the kick with my new shoulder mobility. And then you go back and work on the kick, and rather, this is the opposite of what I did. What I did was just bang my head against the wall going forward, and what a much clever way to do it is you do the thing, you figure out a flaw, you go back and you fix that flaw, you do it again, and then you find a new mistake, and then you go back. And then through doing this, it's a very scientific process because you have this experiment. And then every time you find out something different until you fix all those things that you want, and then you can move forward. And then it's a more enjoyable process as well, because if you're spending years working on the prerequisites, it's not that fun. It might be necessary for a lot of people, so you have to be honest with yourself about that. But if you're only trying the thing, you're limiting yourself because you don't know if you're building bad habits or not. And then how do you know if you're building bad habits? You
Yeah,
probably
and
don't know. That's where you get someone to give you guidance.
yeah, because like I've I've seen this with myself in the handstands specifically. So I've changed, as you said, the way my shoulders are, the way my line is, the way I distribute the weight on my palms, the way I position my hands before I kick up, the coordination and everything else, over and over again. But I think that most people are they clinch to their small achievement if they're able to already hold, and they're trying not to do adjustments because they're like, I want to be able to hold 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. Yeah, but like I even nowadays I try to make changes within the longer holds and see how my body responds and stuff like that. So I think that, as you said, this is a very valuable thing. But I mean, this is, I guess, a human nature. People want to stay within the comfort. So same like changing when I changed from lifting weights to doing body weight stuff. Most people don't want to do that because they've already achieved a decent level of strength, and I mean this is their, how do you call it, this is um, some ego, I guess. And then when you first start with these things, it's totally new, and especially with the body weight stuff, people cannot exert tension the same way with weights, because with the weights, I mean, you have to resist something, whereas with the body weight stuff, what I see as a tendency for most people, it's hard for them to create the tension in order to hold those isometric positions for a long time. Because if you don't hold a handstand, planche, or anything else for a certain amount of time, I mean, you won't be able to make those corrections that we're talking about and those small adjustments and the fine tuning. So that's also important, going back, as you said, with regressions and spending time on your own.
Yeah, it's hard to for a lot of people to go back to being a beginner again, especially like you said, they kind of cling on to their achievements. I always tell students not to celebrate because I'm a little bit on the other side of the spectrum. I never kind of quantify victories. I always move on to the next thing. And maybe that's not the healthiest way to look at things either. But yeah, it's like this idea that your victory, first of all, one victory means nothing unless it means something, but consistency. You do something once, that could be luck. You do something many times in a repeatable performance, that's a skill. The second thing it is very hard to have this potential of failure, and a lot of people get so used to succeeding that it's hard to be in that state because it's a negativity, it's an ego. But the reality is that you learn more from the failures. And I'm looking back at a lesson I got from my capoeira teacher a couple of years ago. He said, you get you win because capoeira, it's a game, right? But it's not like a win or lose game. The point of the game is to keep it going. And then I think somebody asked kind of what's the point of it and how do you win? And you might think, okay, I win if I kick the other guy in the face, if I take the other guy down. And he said something very interesting. He said, no, you win when you get taken down, because when somebody takes you down, that's a lesson that you can learn from. If you take somebody down, you're just reinforcing the thing that you can already do, and you're not learning from that. And then kind of going into a little bit of how the brain works, we try to get into patterns. And once we get into patterns, you no longer have to think critically because the brain does it automatically, which is efficient. It takes less energy, but you're also not building new pathways. You're also not learning. So it's a hard place to be. But getting into this idea of I want experience where I can fail because I learned something from the failure, as opposed to, and I, another parallel is even, this modern culture of sports with participation trophies where everybody wins, and it's like the whole point is to lose. The winning is cool, but if you just get a trophy, then it's not really an achievement. And if you just win all the time, how is that interesting? You can, right? You have trophies,
Yeah.
but you have no experience to back up those trophies.
Yeah, like there are some like top athletes who have this attitude. Even when they win, they're not 100% satisfied because they look at what can be improved. So they're not like celebrating, as you said, all the time. I mean, there should be a healthier balance, as I said, because like even in life, when you achieve something, you should like reward yourself, like praise yourself a little bit, and so that you feel satisfaction and you go on to the next thing. But as you said, I mean, you don't have to get over your head and like be like, yeah, I earned the skill, I unlocked the skill and stuff like that. Because as my handstand teacher Miguel, who's I know your friend, he says
Right?
there's no good days and bad days. There's just like days that you train. Like uh, I remember when I went to his workshop in Florence in 2018, he didn't have a good sleep the night before the first day, so maybe like 4 hours of sleep. He had bitten by some bed bugs and stuff like that, and he was still able to perform everything he would normally do anyway. So I mean, that's what we're talking about, consistency. And I remember even Stephen Kotler, the author, he said, I always practice my best at my worst, because this way I know that if I go on stage and I have to talk in front of audience, I know that I'll be able to do it. So yeah, that's also
Yeah,
important,
and that like
having this
that's a
ingrained.
true. That's what I say too. Yeah, it's very similar. Like if you have the skill in your pocket, you can do it in the worst possible conditions. And that's why I mean any performer, yeah, everything changes day to day. So if you're waiting for a good day for something to happen, if something happened on a good day, great. But the idea of performance and consistency of a skill, it's not PR. It's not like you do it, you peak once a year, your maximum lift. It's like that idea that you have to, and it's another style of training that's not, it's not obvious because you can't mark the achievements as well. Like it's easy to say, oh, I hit a 60-second handstand. And that's a very easy thing to mark on paper, but it doesn't look as impressive to say I hit a 60-second handstand my first try every day for a month.
Mm.
And some of those days I had a shit sleep, and some of those days I was sore. And if you look on the paper, well, you haven't even improved your time. But the time was only the first thing. That was just one marker. But now you've improved that time in different situations. And I mean, it's same to draw another parallel, like in the military special forces, right? So if they train to shoot in a specific way with a specific technique, but shooting at the range is not the same as being in combat. So it's like this idea that you have to be able to do the same stuff under the most stressful situation of your life, and you don't really have that skill until you can do it in the worst possible situation. And it's, yeah, just another kind of
Yeah.
training because you think, and it might go down, like as an example, right? I'm getting into shooting a little bit as well. So you do the drills in good conditions and say, look at my grouping, it's tiny, I'm good. And then you add something like speed, you add one stressful element, and then you see how much worse everything gets. And then which is the training that you push to? Do you push to, I want to tell myself that I'm as good as possible? Or do you try to take the lessons and say, okay, when I try to do it fast, my accuracy went to shit. So that's a lesson. How can I improve on that? And it's like I said, it's those failures that give you lessons and give you something to work on. So I think it's important to, just for life, not even for handstands, just for anything, to be in a situation where you give yourself the opportunity to fail and learn from that failure, as opposed to just being bombarded with success, because it's a false success. It doesn't actually give you anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you said about changing the conditions and still be able to do it, and you refer to like real life. I always tell my clients that we do the training that we do for being good in at life, not being good in the gym in a vacuum, because nobody cares if you can do a handstand or planche or any of those skills. I mean, you don't need those for life, but what the process and what the, as you said, the failures teaches you. This is the important part. And and then it's like that mental capacity that you build to deal with real life situations, because there's like lots of stressors that act on us on a daily basis, and how you react might change everything for you in a certain situation. um and I wanted to ask you about, because from the things that you do quite a lot of things, and you have this self-critic analytical kind of thinking, like exploration. You're always in exploration mode. Is this something which came with your physics background, or have you been this way even before you went to university and growing up like that?
No, I think I was always that way as a kid. I always loved to just go out and play by myself and explore, and that was kind of like, yeah, I even remember having my own theories about the body. I had like this theory about pain. I'd have a cut, and like, what if I push on it? How much? Like, is there a limit? So I'd always be experimenting with that kind of stuff. So I think that was the physics background helped to put some of that on paper, and some of it I didn't like because some of it I found was too analytical. So I try as much as I can to kind of maintain a balance between the like number analytical side and then the intuition analytical side, and go between those two, because I think it, I just try to do everything because I want to have a balance and I want to have all those perspectives. But I don't think it came from the physics background. I think it was something that where I already was as a kid. I was already spending a lot of time alone. I was already kind of I loved exploring by myself, and that's something that I still love to do. So it's just always been with me.
Yeah, I think this is a quality which if you have, and you're consistent, you tend to succeed more often than not, because the time spent with yourself is valuable for that self-analyzing and learning the lessons that you have to learn from failure. And second of all, it makes you really be in the process, like, and enjoy the process, and not just like aim for the skill, and then what, like they always say, like, enjoy the journey and stuff. I know it's a cliche, but like, I'm the same way. I like to learn about movement, so I like to I ran a marathon and learned something from it, from like the movement perspective. I'm learning how to swim because I can't, so I'm learning something. I'm trying to apply what my body can already do in terms of like mobility and movement into some practical athletic skill. And for example, as you said, with like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, my training, um, uh, I get knocked out all the time by my coach. But then, as we discuss, like the moment I tap out, we start discussing the situation, and I'm like, yeah, I missed that, and then here's how the learning comes. And I think it's important also for our listeners and for everyone who's getting into training to actually try and apply what you learn in the gym, in something like that, and some practical situations, sports, whatever.
Yeah,
So
it puts you in a being put in a new situation, and this idea of being forced to adapt and building some kind of adaptation. I was taking it a couple weeks ago in a Screama seminar. I don't even do the martial art, but I just like taking seminars, and it's interesting. It's interesting coming into something as a practitioner or even as not a practitioner, and just kind of seeing how the lesson is. But the guy at the end, he did kind of like a grappling thing with everybody one on one, and he said that idea, like, I don't know who you guys are, I've never trained with you, so I want that lesson because I might be putting myself and you in safely in a situation that I haven't been in. And it was really interesting, and it was really cool to see that as well, that it wasn't like this mechanical, this is the drill, of course things are based on the drills, but then you get into that organic adaptability where everything is different. And yeah, it's important to put yourself in the situation and apply it. And then on the other, I had another thought and then I lost it. I lost that thought. I had another one.
I have some, yeah, I have something to add in that, in reference to your note about this, the martial arts teacher. Because like when I train with my BJJ, I teach my coach about mobility and stuff like that, and he teaches me about BJJ. And it's funny because like sometimes we get into positions, like I'll have like my leg across his diagonally across his shoulder, and like almost like in a front split. We had this situation once, and I first saw how he froze because probably nobody he wrestles with has this kind of like mobility. And at first he's like, and now here like I submit because like he can break my leg. But I've already learned how to isometrically create a contraction in that position, so I'm able to withstand. And then one time he got me to a kimura, so he's like, and now you tap, and like, and I'm like, why? And he's like, because like you might get hurt. And I'm like, I just wanted to feel a nice stretch and stuff like that. So sometimes I see in his face that he's not prepared to, and it's also a learning lesson for him because he doesn't know who he's dealing with and what his capabilities are. So it's good
Exactly.
to be prepared from a life perspective, like because like jiu-jitsu for example is like it came up, it got developed as not as a combat sport but as a self-defense, so it's a
Yeah,
practical skill.
and it's always adapting, and that was the other thought I had, I forgot, is, 'cause I think we moved on to another topic, but this idea of who are you doing it for? And you should be doing everything for yourself, and then when you have that, that's a motivation to get better because you don't need anyone else to give you validation. And that's like the question to ask, especially now with social media being as prevalent as it is. If social media disappeared, would you still be doing the same things, and would you still enjoy them the same? And then that's the question, is, are you, whatever you do, are you doing it for self-development or for other people to enjoy? And that's not a black and white statement either, because maybe by other people enjoying what you do, you get self-development from it. So it's not like there's no right or wrong answer, but it's this idea that if you couldn't tell anybody about what you did, would you still do it? And I remember, like, years ago, right when I was a kid, we before the Netflix and all of this, you would watch shows on TV and they would be on a specific night. And then the next day, it was like a talking point. Everyone would talk about what happened in the shows. And then I remember, like, certain shows I watched, I didn't even like them that much, but I watched them because I knew I could talk to other people about them. And then now thinking back, like, what the point? Why would I even watch these shows if I didn't like them? That's a waste of time. So then that's the question, as well, is who are you doing it for? And if you have this idea of it's all self-development, I think it's a very powerful thing, but it's a hard lesson to learn. It's the same when I was coaching kids as well, like trying to get them into that mindset of, you're not doing this to impress your parents or your coaches. Like, don't do it for the coach's thumbs up. Do it because you enjoy doing it. And then when that barrier is crossed, it's a very powerful thing, because then the kids are unstoppable, because then they're doing it for themselves and they'll work on their own. If the kids are working for a
Yeah,
coach,
but I
they
think
stop
that's
working when the coach isn't looking. But if they're doing it for themselves, they're going in their backyard and they're still training.
Yeah, but I think it's this is like more like psychological and emotional of like part of your upbringing. If you have father figure, and if you don't work these things out early on, I mean, this might serve you not in a good way, and growing up and looking for that validation and for the thumbs up and all those kind of things. Like for me, uh, training is like meditation. Like I don't care. And like nowadays, I started my Instagram, for example, as a timeline of my progress. But it turned like organically it turned into like a business tool and like bringing clients in. But nowadays, to be honest, I don't care so much about posting about my training, or at least the process. Once I probably achieve something like the one arm strata one arm and stuff like that, I'll probably post a video and picture and like be happy about it. But I don't post the process all the time as some other people do. I would rather post my clients' successes and some feedbacks and stuff like that, which brings me more fulfillment at the moment. So, but I guess it's like with everything else, it's like a process, and you need to grow into that. Because like when a person comes and says, I want to learn splits, a handstand, whatever. And I'm like, all right, it's really important for you to have a context of why you want to learn this, because these skills take a long time. And then if you don't have the right mindset, I mean, you're gonna give up quite early. And like one time I had this girl who came to a class and she's like, I want you to teach me how to do a handstand in 1 month. And I'm like, probably there's such a person, but I'm not that guy. So I mean, sorry. And then some people come in and they're like, I want you to teach me the splits. And I'm like, it's going to take 3 years. Are you still ready for it? I mean, do you want to continue or you like, because like, and for me, as I tell them, they're like 3 years. That's a long time. But then I ask them, all right, now it's going to take them 3 years. Like, let's say you're 30 years old. It's going to take you 3 years. And then you're going to live up till like 80 and you're still going to feel good about it. And then you have the flexibility to keep and you're going to learn how to maintain stuff and all that kind of thing. And second of all, 3 years for me, I consider it 3 years because I'm able to like fully go down and come up. So this is like meaning that I can do it anytime, go out of bed and not have to warm up and stuff. I mean, whereas most people might take them longer because a lot of time when coaches, I like always sharing my background of like playing different sports, lifting weights, having that basic strength, good awareness, and all those kind of things because people when they coach oftentimes they miss this small details, and then when they're try to attract clients and they lure them into the funnel or whatever, and then people get wrong expectations of how long it actually takes to learn something.
Yeah, and then part of that is on the internet. You also, I'm dying here. You see the finished result, and you see, and there's a lot of that now. So it's becoming more commonplace, and you see more and more the final skill that took the years to, but you don't see the and it's not that you have to post the process, but it gives sometimes an unrealistic expectation of the process because you see a lot more of that final result. And and yeah, it's a bit part of the culture, and that like the phrase that I use a lot of time is that the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. So you have to be okay with it. Anything worth learning, you're not going to learn in a day, in a month. What you learn in a month, you can forget in 2 weeks. What you
Mm,
learn in 3 years, you probably won't forget.
yeah. And I really felt this was great on your part when at the workshop somebody asked you about like the splits and that kind of like mobility and flexibility part, and you were super honest and said that you've naturally been more flexible, so you're not the best person. You gave some advice from like what you've done and like from what you know, but you said I'm probably not the best guy about this specific thing to learn from, which is quite okay. I mean, you're not supposed to be like the guru in everything. Like I when I don't know, I say I don't know. I mean, I'm not supposed to know everything and help everyone. So that's also valuable thing, I think, for coaches to be honest with their clients.
It's yeah, and it goes back kind of to that ego that it's not only is it okay to say you don't know, that's the mark of honesty. If somebody is claiming that they know everything, they have all the answers, then they're 100% full of shit because even if you are the world's foremost expert in a specific topic, if you're not still evolving on that topic and learning more, it's still a stagnation. So that's like that's one thing that I look for when I go to a workshop and I just kind of observe is how somebody answers questions. And I think it's the mark of a really good teacher in general, or just a good person to say, like, hey, I don't know the answer to this. I can research it, or I can refer you to somebody who knows more than me about that specific topic. It's a really, as opposed to, yeah, it's like, I'm the guru, I know everything, um, and that's a really bad place to be. And a lot of people who got kind of famous in the fitness world ended up developing that mindset of like of being this ultimate authority, where in reality it's the highest level master could still learn from the lowest level student, and you should be able to.
Yeah, and
And
and I
sometimes
think
you learn more from that.
and I
Sometimes
think
you learn more from the white
yeah,
belt.
and I exactly, exactly. And I always tell my clients that I also learn from them, like as they learn from me, because like it takes time and practice to start to notice the small things and play around with like structure, because not everybody will respond to the same type of stimulus and like progressions, regressions, whatever. So it's like a two-way process. And as you said, I think it's like a scarcity mindset on the part of the coaches who claim to have all the answers and know it all. Because like most of like the workshops have gone to like yours, Emmett Lewis's, Miguel, um, Yuval, all of them say, try out different, learn from different teachers, go check out different workshops and stuff. They're not like follow what I tell you, it's the only truth. And I think that that kind of like something I really enjoy about your approach and your type of training, and also your tips that you always give, that it's non-dogmatic. I think it's like people confine themselves and limit themselves and their clients um, by saying, let's teach the handstand this way. And specifically for the handstand, you like play around with it quite a lot, and then because having that knowledge and that variability makes you better at, and even when for your own practice, and also for teaching other people. And um, can you share something about that, and then how you what you think about this, about the dogma, about in movement and stuff?
I think, and I went through that for a while. So, because I trained first of all with no technique, just based on the old school style. I spent years reinforcing that. Then I started learning more about gymnastics technique, and then I started getting into coaching gymnastics. And then there was a period in my life for a few years where I was very obsessed with this is the perfect way to do everything, and I'm going to pick out every detail that's outside of what that perfection is supposed to be. And now I've kind of gone back and forth because it's just this perspective, and it's like this idea. First of all, everybody's different, so everybody's going to respond differently to the training. Secondly, everybody has different goals. So, like one example, this is a very clear one in the handstand world, is this, everybody must have the straight handstand. It's wrong if your back is arched. This is completely wrong. It's not even a hand. Like, what? Why would you throw such negativity into it? If, first of all, it wasn't that long ago that gymnasts did banana handstands, so it's part of the evolution of the
Yeah.
skill. Secondly, if you can do the skill and you can do it safely, and you're not, and you're happy with what it looks like, what does it matter what the perception is? Yeah, there are some mechanical advantages to having a straight handstand, but it's, a lot of it is aesthetic, and a lot of it is aesthetic based on the perspective of modern gymnastics, which is its own box and has its own limitations. And like a capoeira handstand, for example, you don't want to be stiff, you don't want to be super straight. It's fluid, it should be always moving because you have to adapt. And in that sense, just taking these two handstands, a gymnastics handstand would be not very useful in a game of capoeira because it can't adapt. And a capoeira master would look at his handstand and say, "Oh man, you're too stiff, man. You have to relax, relax, man." And then you have the a gymnast who would look at a capoeira handstand and say, "No, everything wrong. You have to squeeze your whole body, point your toes. This is not handstand." And then both of these masters could look at the same skill and say this is a right way to do it and this is a wrong way to do it. But the reality is, what are you trying to do it for? And the best possible scenario is you have the adaptability to do it in both ways. When you're doing a gymnastics skill, you know how to squeeze. When you're playing a capoeira game, you know how to relax and adapt, and you can balance between those two. And I think it's good to have a standard so you know what a standard is, because if you're a beginner training, you want to have something that you're walking towards, because then, but it's good to change that, and it's good to do it in a different way. And I try to do this in a workshop as well. If I see that someone is practicing a skill in a very specific way and they're very good with that, I just tell them to do it in a different way, just to challenge them. Like, really good example, it's in a workshop I did in Sydney. I had somebody who was a pretty high level gymnast, and we're learning some acrobatic skills. And I said, like, clearly you already know how to do a lot of this, so I'm just going to tell you to do it very loose in a way that you've been trained not to do. Why? Because it's going to be hard for her, because it's going to be difficult to get that perspective. And it's, rather than reinforcing what she can already do, it's going to give her another pathway, which again builds adaptability and versatility. And now I don't like to think of there's one way to do it. I like to think of, what's your goal with the skill? What's your long term goal? What standard do you want to hold yourself by? There's no right or wrong answer. It's different for everybody, and it's the same. Like if I need to do something with the standard of a high level gymnast or a circus skill, I understand that perspective and I can hold somebody or myself to those standards. But at the same time, if I want to relax and not do it strictly, I can also appreciate the value that comes within that. And it's and this is where it comes into learning with different teachers too, because sometimes a teacher is limited by their perspective. If somebody was a gymnast their whole life, they see everything through that lens of gymnastics. But what if you look at it from a different way? So yeah, that's adaptability, being able to do the same thing in many different ways, I think is really good, because then you have perspective, then you have context, and then you can step back and see more of the bigger picture. So you can say, what does a handstand mean to a gymnast? Take a step back. What does it mean to just somebody who's a general health and fitness enthusiast? What can you apply? And what do you not need to apply? And to me, this idea of right and wrong absolute is something that you can only use when you have a very specific box and construct to place that in. Yes, in a gymnastics competition, if you don't point your toes, you're going to get points off. So that's a very specific reason to do it. If you're not a competitive gymnast, it might look better if you point your toes. It might look more professional, but is that going to affect the happiness that you get getting from that skill? Is it going to affect the mechanics of the
Yeah.
skill? And then it becomes a choice. Like I say, hey, I'm going to tell you, if I were a gymnastics coach, I would tell you to point your toes. Right now, I'm not a gymnastics coach, so I'm going to tell you that you can point your toes, but if you don't care, it doesn't matter to me either, as one example.
Yeah, because like with I always ask clients when they first come to training, especially with the one on ones, like what's your goal? Because like what's their goal might not be my goal, and it's better for me to work with their goals instead of like pushing my own agenda. Like I might see that they need something, but I mean, we're still gonna work on deficits and stuff that I believe it's important overall for integrity and like for getting stronger. But we still, it's easier for me to set a plan for based on their goals and not on my agenda. And what you said about fluidity and being able to do it different ways, oftentimes like normally people will go squat with your toes pointing forward, and I'm like squat like this, and I have people sometimes squat like this, and squat with internal rotation. And since they've been taught to squat this way, they're not able to do the internal rotation squat or anything like that. Or I ask them to spring on their toes lightly just to warm up and work some ankle stuff, and then dynamic stuff, like plyometric stuff, and they're all stiff in their shoulders and everything super tight. I'm like, you should be able to relax your shoulders and upper body while your ankles are actually adapting and they're taking the force down there. But as you said, like there
It's
people
yeah, it's
people
that
learn one way.
adaptability.
Yeah.
It's like, are you learning to adapt, or do you just learn patterns that you can call upon those patterns? And that's and even very high level athletes, they work in patterns and not adaptability. And like I had a lot of these lessons doing some of the modeling work that I've done, because I had for a while this idea, okay, this is the perfect handstand. And they say, no, it looks more interesting artistically if you do this weird shit. That's a completely wrong technique. And then at first, it was very hard for me to break that, because I was training for so many years with what I thought was perfect technique. And it's again being able to adapt to another person's direction. I was doing a photo shoot recently where I did some handstands for for modeling for like billboard type stuff, and one of the handstands they had me do was just completely like arch back, closed shoulders, one leg was in one direction, feet were kind of weird. Basically everything that as someone who is a technician would say, this is the worst handstand possible. Why would you ever do it like this? And then it's this idea that maybe I wouldn't, but within that context of the director telling me this is the look that they want, I have the adaptability to be able to do it. And maybe I've even never done like that style of handstand before, but having the adaptability to be able to do it in the moment when it counts is really important. And yeah, it's that idea of, you can build the patterns to call upon them, and there's still patterns within patterns, but yeah, I guess adaptability is the word of the day.
Yeah, but I think in order to get to that adaptability stage and the improvisation, as you said, and because this is like something you might have not done before, you still need to build a solid foundation and know the basics and be super consistent, as you said, be able to hit that 60-second mark on your
Oh
first
yeah, yeah,
try, or
absolutely.
be able to do like the entries, all entries, one after one after one. So yeah, that's also important, and I think people rush to improvise before they actually know the basics and train the basics long enough. And I always tell them like you have to get strong in the basics first, and then it's easy to improvise, because sometimes out of the ordinary I try to do some floor movement, like stuff like that, posted on Instagram, social media, just so that I can show that there's a different perspective. We don't want to be rigid and stiff all the time when training, like, because with all the skills and the mobility work, you want to create tension, like joint specific work, if you'd like to do FRC, for example, or some other modality. And then you should be able to be also fluid and then adapt, because when you walk and hike in the woods, and you step sideways, I mean, you should be able,
Yeah.
knee and ankle and everything else should be able to adapt and take that force, for if we talk from a real life perspective. So definitely, and training actually, for me, because I'm not a professional athlete, I'm not a model, and not, I mean, I don't do so many various things as you do in terms of like professional development. I care about longevity, being able to do the things I do and play with my kids and grandkids until I'm like 80 or more. And I tell people, like, for most of us who are like, most of my clients are office workers. Why would you care about something like super crazy or super, like, it's fun, I understand. But apart from that, I mean, you should care not about that, but about not waking up and going to bed with like a scoop of pills and aches and pains all over the place. So the more you build your solid foundation now, the better you feel later on. Because like I tell people, I'm 37. I started this when I was 31, like exploring these kind of things. Although I've been physically active all my life, and I feel better now than when I was 25, because now I have more awareness, more control. I know stuff, and then I can address certain issues if they were to occur, because sometimes I would wake up, things will not feel well, but I know what to move and how to fix things like relatively easy. And that knowledge is invaluable. Where like 25, like you're invincible, like you do crazy shit next day, same stuff and over. But with younger people, I tell them like, start now, because it's going to be easier later on, with especially with all the degenerative processes that the human body is gonna suffer anyway. So it's better to take care of yourself early on. Actually, something I wanted to ask you about, because I was quite surprised to I mean, I was actually super happy that you responded well when we went to restaurants here and we tried different traditional stuff. You were super open to it, and you ate stuff most people, like Western people, wouldn't. And I wanted to ask you about nutrition and how important this is to you and your practice, and how does it affect it. And since you travel a lot and oftentimes you cannot make the best choices, or you work with what you have you noticed that lack of certain nutritional consistency affects your performance?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things in your life that you can control to some degree, and like obviously the physical practice, what you do with your body is one, and then the other one is what you put into your body. So it's I don't follow a specific diet plan because I think there's also that element of adaptability. Like we
Yeah.
live in a time where we have access to pretty much any food we want at any time, which was amazing because my great grandparents, growing up in Soviet Ukraine, were the opposite. They basically had no food. So I think it's good to take advantage of that, but at the same time, kind of understanding. I read the ingredients of everything that I eat. I go to the grocery store before I put something in my cart. I read the ingredients. If I'm at, like on a film set and they have random snacks, I'm not going to be the one popping them into my mouth. I'm going to take this bag. I'm going to read the ingredients, and then if there's ingredients that I don't like, I decide. Sometimes it's okay to eat the shit food, but if you eat it on a regular basis, it's like right? The cliche phrase, "You are what you eat," but literally, your cells are always regenerating in your body. I think the statistic is like every 7 years, all of your cells
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
you got a whole brand new body. So where do you think that energy is coming from? So keeping in mind nutrition is very important for me. I try to understand as much as I can where my food comes from. I try to look for kind of minimal quality ingredients as much as I can. If I can eat local and support local farmers, it's always better. I tend not to eat at restaurants because I like cooking for myself, but I also know exactly what goes into the food I cook for myself. In other countries, it can be very difficult. I'm not traveling now, but usually if I can, I try to get an Airbnb with a kitchen and then I can cook
Hmm.
for myself. Restaurants, generally, in the US, some countries are going to have worse quality restaurant food. Some companies are going to have, or countries are going to have better. In Bulgaria, generally, you go to a restaurant like the places we went to, the food was good, it was fresh, it was
Hmm.
quality, and you could taste it and you could
Yeah.
see it. And so that wouldn't be something that I'm concerned about, but definitely traveling, it's really hard. So you try your best, you do what you can. I try not to, I'm not going to be like, I would rather fast than eat at McDonald's because it was the only option. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's what it comes down to. But I think, yeah, it takes a bit of discipline. But it's one thing that you really can control in your life is what you put into your body. And it's not like you have to eat completely strict 100% of the time, like a bodybuilder, rice and chicken for every meal. I think you should be able to enjoy food and
Yeah.
what goes into it, but it's all a balance. And then if you're eating this, like factory made cake every day or whatever food that isn't good for you, like, what do you think is going to happen? Because your body is pulling the energy from that, the nutrients from that to create yourself. So I think it goes both ways. I think there's a skill to being able to adapt to a shitty diet because what if, like, again, just as an example, if the world goes to shit and you're going to have to eat, prepackaged MREs for a couple of years before you get your
Yeah.
homestead farm going, can you survive on that
Yeah.
because you're eating? So I think there's always a balance, but I think it is important for people to put some kind of care and concern into what they eat and not just to shove down their throat whatever's in front of their face. And obviously that depends on the country. Like basically the less developed of a place you're in, probably the better the food is for you because there's going to be less
Yeah.
processing,
Yeah.
there's going to be
I
less
think so.
factory farming. And
Yeah.
then
And
but
you can get like relatively cheap quality food, like compared to like farmers markets in the US or some other countries, for example. So yeah, I definitely. I mean, and I guess that's another skill that you develop along the way, and again, the adaptability, and then it's a thought process that you can take from training and move it into nutrition and vice versa. So I think as you said, it goes both ways. Most people who are like at a high level sport in sports, I mean, they always care about different aspects of their well being, not just
yeah,
like the nutrition, but the mindset, the psychology, the emotional
the
state, all
thing is
those
that
kind
you
of
have to care, and that's what I'm seeing in a lot of I don't wanna even use that term regular people, but
things.
they just don't care. It's already been set for them, so it's like, "Okay, this is a meal, I'm gonna eat it."
Yeah.
And it's hard because sometimes it's hard in your life to care about so many things, and you only have so many fucks to give, as they say, but yeah, this idea that you have to care about it. If you don't care, nobody is going to care for you because it's your body, and the people that care for you, like I mean in the US especially, have you seen what the government recommends your diet should be? That's not a
Yeah.
healthy diet. That's not a
They,
diet you want.
they call it sad. They call it sad that it's really sad.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you have to care, you have to do some research, and if you start caring, you're probably going to care about it for the rest of your life. I know I am. And it's not
Yeah.
like there's times where I know, like I'm eating this food, I know it's not good for me, but it's okay because maybe maybe there's no nutritional value, but there's emotional value of that food, and there's nothing wrong with that
Exactly.
either. But then it's a balance.
But
If
it's
you
cautious choice. It's like conscious choice.
exactly,
It's not like you just go for it because you don't know why you do it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's the important thing is getting past that barrier to actually care what you're putting in your body.
cool. Awesome, man. We're close to 1 minute off the 1 hour mark, and as I said, I don't want to take too much of your time and make these episodes too long. I guess we can talk a lot more, especially when you're like such a adventurous guy in terms of like an exploring mode all the time. But I guess there's always second episode and options for more. So I want to finish today. Any final thoughts? And what advice would you give people in terms of like training if they're starting right now? What is the best advice that you can summarize in a sentence or two?
Try,
Distill the essentials.
distill the essentials. Try the thing, and then go back and figure out why you can't do the thing, and then
Yeah,
go back and forth.
pretty good.
And then
Pretty good.
don't forget to care.
Don't
Find
forget.
something to care about, and if it's something that you can control in your life, then that's a good thing to care about because then it's on you.
Yeah, awesome, awesome, great advice. Once again, Yuri, thank you for sharing some wisdom and from your
Pleasure.
personal experience. Thank you for coming on the podcast. For all of you guys who joined, thank you for listening. And until next time, see you around.
Cool.